This is an episode about feedback, reacting, and learning from what we hear from others. Welcome to episode 90 of Vulnerability in Life and Art. So because this is a 10th episode, it's just me reflecting. And up until very recently, I didn't know what I was going to reflect on. Usually as a 10th episode approaches, I start having ideas about what I'll want to talk about. This time, I was a bit of a blank slate until just last weekend. I was up in the country with family. And just as a quick aside, I realized, because I said this a couple of times recently to people who are not Canadian, or this might even be specific to people who live in Quebec or even Montreal, but when we say we went to the country, we mean we left the city and went outside the city to, if we're really lucky, to a lake or a national park or somewhere in the wilderness outside the city. So I went to the country last weekend and spent 3.5 days with family and related people. So all kinds of people I am related to by blood or by marriage or by friendship, who I've known for decades. I've been going to the country for this particular country place for 50 years. So I know a lot of these people quite well. And I care a lot about all of them. And I connect particularly with some of them. And there's one person that I have always spent a lot of time talking with, and usually every time I visit, I walk over to their cottage and we have some time together. And so I did that last weekend. I walked over to the cottage and we sat down and we had a tea and a cookie, and I heard a bit about what she'd been up to, and then she asked me what I've been up to, and I talk a little bit about work stuff, which they all know about. I talked a little bit about a book that I'm working on. I'm editing a book on the emotional experiences of learning, sort of academic, professional kind of a book. So everybody seems to be reasonably pleased with that kind of an activity. And then I said, because I had been working on it that morning, I said, I just released the latest episode of the podcast. It was episode 89. And so then she looked at me and she said, you know, your podcast is pretty boring. I can imagine if you're the one asking the questions, for you, you're asking the questions, you're having the conversations. It's interesting for you, but I really find it quite boring. I tried listening to a few. And I had that moment of, this is just interesting on so many levels, right? This is interesting in terms of what's my immediate reaction to this? What do I say or do? What do I take away from this? What do I want to do with what I just heard? What can I learn from this? And so a few things, actually, that were quite interesting to me. And you can let me know if you can relate to this from your perspective in terms of getting feedback on what you do, if it's something you care about. And this podcast is something that I care about. And so the title, A Reckoning, came to me as I thought about really reflecting on what that particular comment meant to me and the podcast more generally. So actually, let me put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to my reaction and learnings in a minute. But the title that jumped into my mind was A Reckoning. And I'm not sure why that came to me. It sounded quite serious, though. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity to really be serious about where I'm at with this podcast. A friend of mine, whose partner passed away very suddenly, who was also a friend of mine, she gave me a book that he had on the etymological... It's called An Etymological Dictionary of the English Language. So it's about where words came from. English words came from. So you can hear the rustling. I am going to read. They have an entry for reckon. And the origin of reckon is to count, to account, and to esteem. It's a derivative verb related to ruling, directing, ordering, explaining, ordaining, and telling. So just that was interesting to me because reckon or reckoning has a basis in reason, in rational analysis. which is kind of what I'm trying to get away from a little bit by doing this podcast. But I guess old habits do die hard, and I immediately went to my mind to a word that was about, making sense of things from a rational perspective. So that's just interesting to me in terms of reflecting on my own thinking and feeling, my patterns of how I approach things, that I would jump on a word like a reckoning. But more important is what was the reckoning, or where did my mind and hopefully my heart take me when I got this feedback from someone I've known for 50 years. And it was strange because I really did have a bit of an out-of-body experience. I expected myself to be hurt. I actually expected myself to feel that twinge, that feeling. I'm sure you know that feeling when somebody says something that's not what you might hope to hear or expect to hear. That feeling that somebody doesn't value what you do when it's something you do care about a lot. But I didn't. It was this weird sensation of, oh, that's interesting. She finds it really boring. And then I could have gone off on the path of, well, why does she find it boring? What is it about her that she doesn't find this interesting if I find it interesting? And I also thought, that also doesn't matter. It's self-selecting. It's just something that she can resonate with, or it's not. And it's not. And so it remains something that resonates with me, this podcast. But I don't think it's enough that it just resonates with me. I can't consider continuing a podcast that is just about me and what I get out of my conversations with other people. So then I guess what I thought reckoning might mean is some sense of taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture of the podcast and why I do it and where I think I want to take it, because I don't put thought into that. I'm not a big planner. I don't always think in advance about what I can or could be doing. And I think I've shared this story before, but when I was in the very, very early days of doing this podcast, I got advice from an acquaintance who said, you really ought to plan a year in advance so that you know who you're going to interview and you can have a theme and everything is organized and structured. And my gut reaction to that was absolutely not. First of all, I'm not capable of doing that. And second, that's not really how I want to approach this. This is a very fluid, open experience. I never know often who I'm going to speak to next. And to the point where I interviewed a gardener. That was probably the biggest stretch so far in terms of looking to talk to people who had experiences that could relate in some kind of different way to the themes I try to explore through these conversations. But if I do take that step back and I think about what the podcast is for me, I do feel very strongly that it is a way of connecting with other people and hoping to offer conversations that spark feelings and thoughts in them. So for the people who do listen, if you find things in those conversations that help you make a choice, consider a choice, even just be open to doing something that maybe you haven't thought you could do or should do in terms of self-expression, whatever the form that might take. And that is why I reached as broadly out as speaking with a gardener, because there's an infinite number of ways that we can express ourselves. This podcast is how I express myself through these conversations. It's also how I learn. It's also how I challenge myself. And so for you, I really would want these conversations, and not every conversation is going to resonate with every listener. And I think that's actually a good thing. There are going to be some that are more meaningful than others to each person who does listen. But I really hope that by putting these conversations out, that you would maybe look at something in a different way, see opportunities for yourself in different ways, encourage yourself to take some chances, to do some things that you show to other people to get their responses, because you learn from all of those pieces of feedback. And honestly, 3 months ago, if this same person had told me that the podcasts were boring, I would have been probably quite devastated. But something has been happening even in me in the past, I would say, few years, but definitely over the past 6 months, where I think I am starting to feel more comfortable and more confident in what I'm doing and why. And I don't look for the validation in feedback as much as what I can learn from it. And that's huge for me. That is absolutely huge. That's a lifetime so far of battling. First of all, not even recognizing, but then battling this sense that I'm trying to measure up to expectations that come from outside of me. I don't know if that is meaningful to you, but it's the first time that I get feedback that was something that I think would have been quite hurtful to me in the past. That really wasn't this time. And it was shocking to me. It was really shocking. That's what I mean by out of body. I looked down and I thought, who is this Sarah who just thought, oh, that's cool. I mean, it just means it's not for you. And even she, I think, was slightly surprised that I didn't have any response to it. I didn't even, I wasn't visibly upset, obviously, because I wasn't even upset. And I just said, oh, okay, well, I can understand that. And we went on to talk about something else. It was fine. And it was just a really great moment of awareness and openness for me to make space for me and what I think is important, to make space for her and what she values. And hopefully making spaces for all of you in some form to question and consider and have insights and challenge and feel safe and do some of the things you always dreamed of doing. As always, I would love to hear what you think, if any of this means something to you, or just as valuable if it really doesn't. I would love to hear why. I'm absolutely open to all of your thoughts and questions and insights. Thank you.